wants to be a cool kid and have all these gadgets and a gun. Okay, you carry a gun, especially if you're in the private sector. You're not a soldier, you're not in law enforcement. If you carry a gun with a light on, when's the last time you needed that? And most people, if they're honest, will tell you, not really. I think lights in today's world are extremely overrated.
Despite what all the FUDs out there tell you, lights on your firearms are incredibly important, both on pistols and on rifles. But whenever you put a flashlight on a rifle, you have a little bit more leeway in how and where you can attach that flashlight. So in today's video, we're going to talk about some things that you should consider when attaching flashlights to your rifles. Hey everyone, welcome back to Purposeful Armament. Like I said in the intro, today we're going to be talking about some considerations that you should make when attaching lights to your rifles. Now, in front of me, I have two rifles, both different platforms with two different styles of lights, both configured, well, frankly, very differently. I've seen a lot of people both online and in real life not really give a lot of thought as to where they are going to be attaching their flashlights. So I'm going to make this quick video to sort of demonstrate this to you. Now, there are three major considerations that you should think about. So number one is how and where you're going to mount your light. Number two is how you're going to control your light. And number three is how your body is going to interface with the light's controls. So let's talk about it. So let's talk about where and how to mount your flashlight to your rifle. Now, this is going to be very rifle dependent, but in general terms, you're going to want to mount your light as far forward on your handguard as physically possible. And in some cases, as we will see, you might want to mount it even further forward. So generally speaking, mounting your light as far forward as possible is going to help to eliminate a lot of the shadow that is present from the barrel. As you can see here on this AK, this light is mounted as far forward as I can physically make it go. Even with this light being set up in this manner, I still do get a decent amount of shadow from the barrel and the muzzle device. Now, for some of you, that might not really sound like a very big issue, but it can be whenever you actually go out and start shooting at night. For instance, in our last night shoot, you can check out the video here, or wherever the card is at, you can check out the video. But in that video, I noticed that there was a decent amount of shadow from the barrel on some of the rifles that we shot. And while that wasn't really inhibiting me from seeing my target downrange, it was occluding my field of view with the light itself. So that's just something that you should consider. On AKs, you can only get so far. On ARs, you can get much closer to the end of the barrel, but just generally speaking, get that light as far forward as you possibly can. Now, on something like this Tri-Arc here, I have a suppressor attached. Now, this suppressor creates a massive shadow if you have your light mounted in a more traditional location, i.e. back here on the handguard. I'll put up a video showing suppressor shadow because it actually is something that is like very inhibiting of your line of sight with the flashlight. Again, not something that is going to completely prevent you from using your flashlight, but something that is going to be at the very least annoying and at the most occluding your vision. So to combat that, I've used something like this TRX Arms light bar. As you can see, this flashlight is mounted very far forward on the suppressor, leaving only a couple of inches of space to cause shadow. Now, number two, how you're going to control your flashlight. There's pretty much two camps here. You have clicky tail caps, which operate like a normal flashlight. And then you have pressure pads, which both of these flashlights that we have here today, both use pressure pads. As for which one you should pick, it's really kind of dependent on you and what you want. Now, generally speaking, clicky tail caps draw less power than switches, and even some of the switches draw more power than others, but it's very menial. You can't really honestly tell a huge difference at all. Clicky tail caps will allow you to eliminate a lot of the stuff that you're going to have on the front of the rifle. So for instance, on this Tri-Arc, if I have a clicky tail cap, I'm going to be able to eliminate this unit right here, this Cloud Defensive LCS. I can eliminate this, I can eliminate this wiring, and I can just have a very simple interface. Now, if we look at something like this Streamlight, I have a massive pressure pad on here, and using a clicky cap could really eliminate a lot of this excess, space that's being taken up. That is going to, however, impact obviously how I'm mounting my flashlight. You would be surprised how many people don't think about this, but clearly, if I'm shooting this gun right-handed, meaning that my support hand is going to be on this side of the weapon, I'm going to have to move my flashlight from the right to the left so that I still have access with my thumb to the clicky tail cap. If you're using a clicky tail cap, you are oftentimes more restricted on where your light can go on your rifle, as opposed to if you're running a pressure pad, because you do have the wiring and the pressure pad itself to really accommodate you. And like on this AR-15, where I have my pressure pad on top, I can access this no matter if I'm shooting left or right-handed. It's the same no matter what. Now, also generally speaking, pressure pads are going to have a little bit more control over your light. Typically, clicky tail caps are just, you click it on, and it just stays on until you click it again, and then it turns off. Could be different depending on the tail cap, but generally speaking, that's kind of how it works. Now, this pressure pad on my Triarch is a momentary on-off. So I have to hold this pad down the whole time that I want light. Whereas something like this, on this Streamlight, I have the ability to do momentary on-off, and I also have a clicky button here that will turn the light on and off until it's clicked again. So which one should you get? It's kind of up to you. I generally think that people should run pressure pads because it gives you more control over your light. It allows you to kind of utilize it a little bit easier, a little bit quicker, but it can also lead to, some negligent discharges of the light, which can pose some issues, especially if you're doing some fun stuff at night, we'll say. Just pick one and get good at it. If you're not a fan of pressure pads, go with the clicky tail cap. It's going to work almost just as well. And the third and final thing that you're going to want to consider is how you are going to interface with the controls of your flashlight. So here are the three things you should understand when you're trying to determine how you're going to interface with the controls of your flashlight. Number one, you want the controls within reach of your support hand. Okay, I've seen people who will take their pressure pads and have a really long wire and they'll put it way back here on their AR-15. Or I'll see people who have their grips way back here and they're gripping the rifle, they're gripping it way back here, and then they put their pressure pad way out front like it is here. You want your pressure pad or your control for your flashlight to be within reach of your support hand. Wherever you're typically shooting your gun from, in my case, I typically have my hand right here, I want my controls for my flashlight to be very easily accessible. I don't want it to be way back here where I have to essentially break my support hand to access my light. I don't want it to be like way too far forward. I wouldn't want a clicky tail cap on this either, because I don't want to have to break my support hand grip to come up here and press the light on. I want to make sure that this is within reach of my support hand. On something like this AK, you have even less options in terms of how you shoot this rifle, especially with these traditional handguards and gas tube covers. On an AR-15, right, the handguard can go all the way out to pretty much the end of the barrel almost. But with this, I have to have my hand back here, and it has to be in this general area. I don't have a lot of wiggle room. So I want to make sure, again, that if I'm attaching my light, it is within grip reach. So if I'm using a clicky tail cap, I'm going to transfer this light to the other side so that it is within easy reach. I don't have to really break my grip. Next, we want to make sure that we're not inhibiting our grip with our control for our flashlight. What I mean by that is, I don't want to create an issue with this. It's not really a problem just because of the design and how I have it set up, but I don't want to create a problem with my support hand grip. Okay, so in other words, I don't want to set this flashlight up in a specific way that my support hand grip has to change completely. I've been shooting with the same, thumb over bore type grip for the entirety of my shooting career, which has been almost a decade at this point. And I don't want to change that up just because of a flashlight. You can set this up to be effective with your current support hand grip. So in this case, all I've done is just put this on top and put it right where my thumb is at. Same thing like this. I'll try and throw in some clips of whenever I was actually attaching this flashlight to this AK, because I did actually severely inhibit my grip with one of the positions I tried for this pressure pad. And so I changed it because I don't want to have some weird grip like this on my AK to avoid hitting the pressure pad. I want to have my normal grip on my AK and have my pressure pad in a position where it's not going to inhibit my grip at all. Finally, the last consideration that you should make. You want your light set up in a way that you are not going to accidentally discharge the light. We can sit here and talk about stories from veterans or whatever about emptying their lights and it leading to some scenarios. I'm looking at you, John Lovell, but for us civilians, there is a different reason that we don't want to negligently discharge our light. I've been to the range, and I'm sure you guys have been to the range, and you've been shooting, and you've noticed that someone has accidentally turned on their light. Or you notice that while someone is shooting, they are shining their light downrange. That's because they have their light set up in such a way that they are discharging it on accident, just shooting like normal. These flashlights, even these really nice flashlight like this mod light, only lasts in ideal conditions with fully charged batteries for about 70 minutes. It can be even worse for other high candela, high lumen, high output rifle lights. These flashlights do not last. And 1 or 2 range trips, you're probably going to notice that your batteries are going to be almost shot, especially if you're accidentally engaging the light during every single drill that you're shooting. And you might think, well, that's not a big deal. I could just buy new batteries and switch the batteries out. And you're absolutely right. You can do that and you should do that. However, if this gun is going to be set up as a fighting rifle or as a home defense rifle or what have you, a range defense rifle even, if you have that rifle set up in that way, you need to be confident that if you have to pick it up for any reason, that flashlight is going to work. You might not have time to go to the drawer and pull out batteries and switch out batteries. You might not have time to do all that. You might just have to grab the rifle and go. You don't know. I've seen people unscrew their flashlights a little bit. And while that does work, you could just set it up right the first time and not have to worry about that at all. Like I said, that does work, but you're going to have to remember when there's a bump in the night, you're going to have to remember that you need to screw that cap back on. I've seen some people put the little plastic film that they ship with to keep the batteries from making a connection. I've seen some people leave that in and then they'll just say, oh, well, whenever I need it, I'll just unscrew it and take it out. Again, you might not have time to do that. Your rifle should just be ready to go right off rip. And you should have it set up in a way that you're not gonna accidentally discharge your light. I've also seen some people just take the batteries fully out of the flashlight. That's probably the worst possible thing that you could do, because now if you ever need it for anything, you have to find batteries, insert the batteries, screw everything back together, and then go. So I would just say, set it up the right way first, take these points into consideration, then you won't have to worry about any of these other scenarios. It'll just be ready to go whenever you grab it. And of course, by no means am I saying you need to do this for every rifle, just for rifles that you are going to have to rely on and count on. So let me demonstrate this a little bit. So for instance, on this Triarch, I'm using a Cloud Defensive LCS. It is expensive, but it is worth it in my opinion. I can very simply and easily slide my momentary on-off switch into the Cloud Defensive unit here, and whenever I go and I get a grip on this rifle, it's very easy. I can rest my thumb on here, I can even push down, it doesn't really matter. I have a sort of buffer across the top where it isn't going to engage the pressure pad. But then as soon as I need it, I can shift my thumb ever so slightly and discharge my flashlight. That is great because whenever I'm doing normal stuff on the range, I just leave my thumb crossed over and I'm not going to risk engaging the flashlight. On this AK, I did do some experiments with it for a while to find the best place. This might not seem like the best place, but whenever I clamp over the top of this rifle, this actually sits perfectly in the web of my hand right there. It sits perfectly, and I can still grip and clamp down on this rifle and not have any issues with accidentally discharging my light. Then whenever I need to discharge my light, I can simply squeeze in with the palm of my hand, or I can shift my thumb back a little bit to hit the pressure pad. So those are a couple of different ways that you could do it. By no means are those the only 2 ways to do it. You could do it a number of ways, but the point is just to make sure that you're not positioning your pressure pad in such a way that you're going to accidentally discharge it whenever you're shooting normal drills at the range. And again, these are not the only 2 setups that you could have. There are other various things that you could do. Just pick something that works for you and start doing it. Test it out, try it out. There might be a couple of different positions that you might want to try with your pressure pads. Just give it a shot, put a little bit of effort into it, and you'll get it. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. I hope that you learned something. If you did, leave a comment below about how you set up your flashlight on your rifle, and I will see you guys in the next video. Remember, stay armed.
A and C.
A's and C's.
Yeah. You got two A's. These were both mine.